What is up, Star Wars fans? Welcome, and I know I'm a little bit late to this. I know I'm still playing catch up on when I went away. That is the thing about running a YouTube channel. If you decide to go away for a few days, you usually, especially if you cover the same space that I do, miss out on quite a few things, and you pay for it a little bit later. But a lot of you have been wondering about my thoughts on the new Disney Plus series, and that is Andor. So today, I thought I'd give an overall review on the first 4 episodes. So not only hadn't I seen the first 3, but today I've literally just got done watching for the first time episode 1, 2, 3, and the latest episode 4. So I don't know if I'm going to get into that kind of breakdown until next week where you go over the details. Oh, there was a marking on this door, and could that mean that this is foreshadowing this? This is more of my thoughts, my feelings, because there's been, obviously, with a new series, especially a new Star Wars series, quite a bit of feelings from the fandom with regards to this show that I've been picking up. Some people love it. Some people think, this is kind of boring and it doesn't really feel Star Warsy. So first of all, let me preface this by saying that I actually like Rogue One, a Star Wars story, and I don't mean to let that come off as, I actually like it and you don't. It's actually, I think, one of the most popular Disney Plus Star Wars pieces that they've put out since acquiring it, which is interesting to say because obviously it was one of the first pieces of content that got put out, but then there's The Mandalorian, and now we're revisiting Andor, Cassian Andor, as Luthen says. And it's interesting to see what people say about this show, because I'm not saying that everyone's calling it bad, I'm not saying everyone's calling it amazing, but there is some as I was saying, this is really boring, even after the first 3 episodes. But I personally, I don't know about you, do let me know down in the comments below if you found this this is like a drag. But I didn't really find it that way. I don't know if some people's expectations for this show thought that it would mean something else entirely. Obviously, Andor isn't going hard on fan service, Easter eggs here and there, like a lightsaber hilt in the background or anything like that. It's kind of like Rogue One, a Star Wars story, but Andor, a Star Wars story. Getting into the backstory there, leading up to the events of Rogue One, I trust many of you know this is more or less skipping years, getting right up until when he goes on that Rogue One, a Star Wars story mission. I found it really interesting getting into a little bit of a different aspect of the Star Wars universe. It truly is a different kind of tale that isn't so, as I would describe it, beholden to the typical aspects of Star Wars that you'd find in other Star Wars media, but I don't think that's too different from what we got and from what people were praising with Rogue One, a Star Wars story. So I don't know if those same people who enjoyed Rogue One, a Star Wars story are kind of saying, oh, this is boring, which would perplex me because this does feel down that similar vein of, okay, well, this is still Star Wars, it's set in the Star Wars universe, obviously at the height of the Empire, but it's not like it's doing madly different things than what Rogue One did. Maybe it's because we got 3 episodes where it was a little bit of preparation, a bit of exposition, building the world, the characters, the backstory, your regular players like Bix or the freaking Deputy Inspector and whatnot, and then only in episode 4, we've now jumped to Coruscant, we're getting Mon Mothma, we're seeing a little bit more to Luthen's life, which is, I love that, by the way, seeing him be like Cassian Andor, and then when he's on Coruscant in his little kind of antiquity shop or whatever you want to call it, Stellan Skarsgård's demeanor is completely different. It's like, oh yes, you're onto this, oh this is like an ancient Utapauan freaking spear or something. But I've been enjoying the ride, honestly. I don't really have too many bad things to say about it. I mean, of course, if I don't think this is particularly nitpicky, there are a few moments here and there where, for example, Tim runs out in the street where you've literally got the corpo enforcement there and Bix is being handcuffed to the wall, and the whole time they're telling him to stay back, and he initially does. But then he has the genius idea of who did this, and starts running and then gets shot. Moments like that in shows like this, I am kind of like, why? And I know there's always going to be defenders saying, but he was emotionally overtaken and what? No, it was still stupid. But still, the most important thing for me is, do I enjoy this show? Because as I always say, for a reviewer such as myself, I think if you want to review a show and be as comprehensive as you can be and objective, and what I mean by that specifically is objective without the bias. So just taking the bias away of your fandom for Star Wars and looking at it that way. But then, of course, there's the subjective experience as a Star Wars fan that, for example, a really good example of this is that Kenobi Kenobi, I really subjectively enjoyed it, but in the, removing my bias away, kind of looking at it a bit more objectively through that critical lens, it was a bit here and there along the way, but I was still very entertained. Now, Andor, I feel like, is already doing a better job than Kenobi, and that's just weird to say because it almost feels wrong to say. Like, I was loving seeing Ewan McGregor back, this, that, and the other, even in the first few episodes, and you might get some people watching this right now, maybe you being like, really? Boba, like the first 3 episodes of Andor, don't get me wrong, I enjoyed it, but like, was that really as good as Kenobi? But this is what I mean, like the curtain of the kind of non-biased and critical reviewing and then the subjective. You might just be enjoying Kenobi more from the subjective Star Wars fandom in you, but like for me, watching a show, basing it on every level I can under the umbrella and looking at Andor, it is better, at least for now, after these 4 episodes I've watched. It is telling a story I'm interested in. I really like Diego Luna as Cassian. Obviously, the first episode was most definitely setting things up, and throughout the 4 episodes, we obviously get the Kenari backstory for Cassian with his younger sister there. That plays right into the beginning first few scenes where he's gone to that planet looking for his sister, but then you get 2 douchebag guards there. That goes a bit south because Cassian kills them, and that sets up the whole premise for, oh man, these guys make me laugh because it's like they're wannabe Imperials, because certain sectors in the galaxy, instead of having like a heavy Imperial presence there, because that's another thing that I really like about this and what I was anticipating is the Imperial politics. Now, to some people that may sound really boring, but that is exactly what I wanted to get into. If you're a fan of the Thrawn books, like it does get really interesting, and in a period of Star Wars like this where, we've explored the Empire, but not truly, like going back to Coruscant, seeing the Galactic Senate, seeing the Imperial freaking Council Room have all their little squabbles and reports on financing a certain Imperial presence in some sector, and if we should do that because that would, draw more funds. And so you get the pre-more security inspection guys, and as I said, they're kind of like wannabe Imperials because they are more of a corporate entity that is kind of hired out by the Empire, I guess you could say. But as we know, after Deputy Inspector Khan's mess up, even though his boss told him not to do anything, this guy is a hardcore Imperial wannabe, to the point of where he tries to go after Andor after basically being told to like hush this down, and these 2 guards are douchebags anyway, so let's just write it down to that they finally picked on the wrong person. I actually kind of liked Khan's boss because he was just kind of playing, he knows the system. It's like, do we really want to waste resources going on this when those 2 douchebags probably got themselves killed anyway? But Khan is most definitely out to prove himself, but it goes awry, and he ends up returning home to his mother on Coruscant and getting a slap across the face. I'm kind of interested to see where his character goes from here, because it seems like he's continuing on, but he's basically been let go, or at least he's being transferred. As those first couple of episodes concentrate on the more corpo enforcement side of things, then in episode 3 and especially 4, we get into the Imperial Security Bureau on Coruscant, capital of the galaxy, and that gave me a little bit of wave of nostalgia, because it's like, man, we haven't been here for a minute. Like, so going back to this again, as I stated earlier, was one of my more anticipated things, and it didn't really let me down. We have the Imperial politics, and the funny thing is, certain Imperial officers do get in the way of other ones, as we saw with those 2 particular characters. They are essentially, running and keeping an eye on all of these different things in the Empire, treading on each other's shoes, making sure resources are being spent in the right areas to govern control. I like to just view it as this Imperial scum gathering, and as Partagaz puts it himself, the casting is on point, by the way. Partagaz is just like, what is our purpose? Security is an illusion. We're healthcare providers. We treat sickness, we identify symptoms, we locate germs from within or outside. The longer we wait to identify a disorder, the harder it is to treat a disease. And funnily enough, that is what one of the Imperial officers that we're concentrating on this season is getting into quite a bit. She's actually on the tails of these, because this is all the foundation of the Rebel Alliance, right? And she's already picking up the very beginnings of this rebel activity by saying that these activities are probably going on in anticipation of an organized rebellion. And she has 3 previous case files on her desk that begin to suggest a pattern. And it's just like, well, they come to me when there's something more definite. And that's one thing as well. The Empire's overconfidence is their downfall usually. And that is something that's echoed throughout these episodes as well. because one of my favorite scenes actually is when we finally get the buyer, Luthen, meeting Andor to get that Imperial Star Path thing, but it's the message that's echoed with the Empire. As Andor says, to steal from the Empire uniforms, they're so proud of themselves that they don't even care. They're so fat and satisfied, they can't even imagine. And Luthen's like, imagine what? That someone like me could ever get inside their house. Yet, you know, you obviously do have that particular Imperial officer picking up on this, but the grand hierarchy of everything is like, as if anything is going to happen. And that is their undoing ultimately, all the way leading up to Rogue One with the massive rebellious events that take place there. Obviously then going up to A New Hope with the Death Star being destroyed. It's themes like that which is being laced in Andor and in these first 4 episodes that I feel like it is Star Wars. Because again, this is something I'm seeing various popular reviewers say, and you know, they can have their opinion, that's fine. Saying it's boring or it's just, it doesn't remotely feel Star Wars. And I'm not saying those people feel the need like to see Vader every second or some kind of fan service, but I do feel like you can tell a Star Wars story like this that does feel very Star Wars still. It's just, again, it's quite far removed from the typicalities of Star Wars that we've seen in other projects, shows, movies, that maybe it's catching some people off guard. And I don't know if that's due to expectations, but maybe my expectations were dialed slightly correctly. I don't know, because as what we've just been going over with the politics of things, the overconfidence of the Empire, getting into the foundation of rebel activities, certain people within the Empire, these big chess players who may not seem like it now, even though Luthen obviously does, or Mon Mothma, these people are crucial that if they weren't around within that of the Lion's Den on Coruscant, then the major events that toppled the Empire eventually later down the timeline would never have come to pass, or it would have happened a lot later. So to me, I don't really see what's not so Star Wars about that so much. The one thing I keep coming down to is perhaps it's just honestly like going completely to a different sector, no pun intended there, than what we're used to. New characters, like going around a town where you see people doing their everyday in the life of stuff like Bix, and I love Bix. I want to see more of Bix. Bix. Going around all over the place, meeting some bigger characters, some minor characters who are just doing their job, like Tim or whoever else. Martha, of whom we saw take young Cassian from his Canary home because, as she basically put it, they would be decimated anyway. And another thing, just showing a different light on the Republic is interesting because we saw the Canary people there and that Republic dude shot first. And as Martha said herself, the reason why she was taking him, even though it seemed a bit dodgy at the time to just kidnap him, is because she knew that all of his people would be wiped out in just a matter of time. And if I even remember correctly, we saw that shot in the trailer of the Imperial Star Destroyer. Now, we haven't actually seen that yet. I'm sure that's what shot down that Republic ship that all the kids were going to, but I don't know if it'll be them who wiped them out. She was inferring that it would be the Republic that would do it because she did say that they were coming to retrieve the stuff in the crash landing or whatever. But getting to more or less the bottom line here, I think people will start to, if you've been doubting it a little bit or the pacing's taking you a little bit to get into, but you're still somewhat enjoying it, I think people who are in that lane or that side of things will be enjoying it a lot more from now on, especially as we're getting into the more, again, maybe me saying political just sounds, oh, Boba, that's going to be boring. But since we're getting into the more Mon Mothma side of things, you know, with how she was saying there's spies everywhere, and now every day when she goes to the bank, all new faces there or whatever, a new driver, there's spies in the Senate all the time, and that is going to be very dodgy, especially as Mon Mothma is a huge pillar in the Rebel Alliance, and at the moment she's been giving funds to their cause, but moving money is getting more and more dodgier for her. And of course, we're building up to this main bigger mission, and that is stealing from the Aldhani garrison, and that's where a little bit of tension came in, because of course Luthen offered Andor something much more than just buying that Imperial device he had, and that is to fight for the cause. Now, this garrison houses the payroll for the entire Imperial sector, so that is tons and tons and tons of money, and that will wound the Empire a little bit, especially as there was commentary in that little Imperial Scum Council meeting about spending money on certain resources. Should we be doing that? So if they lose hundreds of thousands, if not millions of Imperial credits, then yeah, they're going to be very pissed about that. And as for the mission in of itself, some people may be like, oh, you know, just going to an Imperial garrison or whatever doesn't doesn't sound too exciting. Don't forget that these are the very building blocks of the Rebel Alliance. They're not like a fully fledged thing. Ramping up this mission, which does seem like a bit of a suicide run, as they were saying, into this garrison to steal the Imperial payroll, will be giving us quite a bit of action that I'm sure, or at least I hope, will be quite entertaining. So to be honest, I'm quite on board. I'm particularly looking forward to seeing how things unfold, because this is just a momentum snowball, so to speak, in terms of in-universe build-up between that of the Empire and the founding pillar blocks of the Rebel Alliance. With missions like this, we have certain characters, as I said earlier, like that officer, Dedra Miro, that supervisor in that Imperial Security Bureau getting on the ball of things. She's definitely not going to let it just drop there. The Mon Mothma stuff, we have that dinner meeting with her husband coming up, and as she said, a lot of them hate her and try to undo things that she does every single day. There's a particular character that made an impression on me with regards to the people in the mission, or, you know, those who are going to the garrison, and that is Nemik. He seems to be the one rooting for Andor most of all when everyone else is distrusting, and I just know he's gonna die. I know he's gonna die, and maybe that will be quite a driving force that will propel Andor to feel obviously bad, I guess, but if he does die, saving him and saying fight for the cause, maybe that's a bit basic, obviously, the way I'm coming out of this, but it could spring him on to really sign up to be the man who really is quite about the Rebel Alliance, or like forging that in the years to come, whereas right now, he's kind of just wanting to get off planet, get away from the corp security, but he's found himself a part of this mission. Hey, 200,000 credits sound nice, but he's not madly on board. Don't forget as well, we've got other characters to come like Saw Gerrera. Things are just gonna keep ramping up. Now, I know it sounds like I'm giving this show high praise, but I think I've more got this energy because maybe it's just because I've watched all 4 episodes back to back, but I enjoyed myself. I did. Again, I don't think it's up here, but I definitely don't think it's like down here. I don't think it's like a 4 or a 5, which would be stark in the middle of average. I do think it's like floating somewhere, and it's increasingly showing its potential and promise. And I just got a feeling that now we've got that exposition and setup and characters and mission and story underway, it will ramp up into a more exhilarating series of events with how the story is unfolding, especially with Vel and Luthen's plan ahead and everything else that I've mentioned. So I will be doing weekly breakdowns, carrying on, getting into a bit more of the specifics. This one, I just wanted to get into a bit of an overall review. So what did you guys think of Andor on Disney Plus? Do you think, I've got a feeling some people will be like, I enjoyed it, it's not all that, but some of you may really enjoy it and kind of like this other lens into just like, you know, don't forget the Star Wars galaxy is freaking huge. So I'm all about other stories. I'm mainly campaigning on going back thousands of years into the past, into Knights of the Old Republic, and finally getting out of that frickin' 60 to 80 year plus timeline of the Skywalker saga or whatever. Again, I love Star Wars and that's what I grew up on, but there is much needed opportunities in other storytelling areas, and one of them, to be honest, is Andor, albeit it is in that same Empire storyline, but hopefully one day I'll get my wish and we will go into other areas. But the reason why I brought that up is because, well, Andor is something a little bit fresh, albeit with a familiar character from quite a few years ago now. So we'll be reading every single one of your comments. Looking forward to see what you have to say. Let me know your favorite character. What's your favorite part so far? Your favorite episode? If you got this far, I'd really appreciate it if you left this video a like. I don't have an absolutely whopping huge Star Wars fan base here, so it'd be good to get some more Star Wars fans in to discuss. Links are in the description down below if you want to follow me a little bit more, but I am going to love you and leave you until next week, of course, or if you watch my other videos, maybe tomorrow. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have a lovely rest of your day, and may the Force be with you always.